At the edge of a forgotten village in the Vietnamese countryside, where bamboo rustled like whispers and buffalo paths faded into rice fields, there stood a wooden shack leaning into the wind. It wasn't much, just a roof patched with rusted tin and walls made of old shutters nailed together. But if you came close enough, you'd hear the sound of carving, software steady, like someone writing their regrets into wood. The man who lived there was known simply as Tin. No one called him Master Tin, or Uncle, or even Mr. Just Tin. He didn't speak much, didn't visit the market, didn't celebrate holidays, but he carved. And what he carved were doors, not chairs, not beds, not shrines like other carpenters, only doors. Every week, a new one stood leaning against the outside wall. Some were grand, with curling vines etched into the frames. Others were plain, worn, almost silent in appearance, like they belonged in forgotten places. But none of them were ever sold. He never delivered them, never installed them. He just made them, and then stacked them, one behind another, like memories too heavy to burn. Some villagers said he'd gone mad. Others believed he was haunted. But the older ones, the ones with silver hair and heavy eyes, they remembered. They remembered a little girl, a funeral, a door that slammed too hard, and a man who disappeared the next day, taking nothing but a chisel and a prayer. That man was now just a shadow with calloused hands. And for nearly 20 years, his doors remained unopened. If stories like this, quiet, layered, human, speak to something inside you, we invite you to subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. Because here, every carving carries a piece of someone's truth, even when no one's watching. One traveler once stopped and asked, "Why do you only make doors?" Tin looked up, brushed the dust from a finished panel and said, "Because one day, I might be ready to open one again." That answer never left the traveler's mind, nor will it leave yours. For those who believe that even broken people still build beautiful things, stay with us. Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist and follow the sound of chisel strokes into stories few dare to tell. Before he became the man of closed doors, Tin was known for opening them. He was the best carpenter in the region, known far and wide for crafting elegant door frames that didn't creak even after decades. Families would wait months just to have him design the entryway to their new home. He believed that a door was never just a door. It was a promise of welcome, of shelter, of new beginnings. But one rainy afternoon changed all that. The house belonged to Mr. Poof, a close friend of Tin's, whose youngest daughter, Mai, had just turned 6. Tin had built the front door himself. Redwood, sturdy, carved with delicate patterns of birds and blossoms. It was his proudest work. On the day he came to install it, he was tired, having worked 3 nights without rest. Still, he wanted it perfect. So he lifted the door himself, braced it on uneven stones, and promised to come back the next morning to adjust the hinges properly. But that night, a storm came. The wind howled, and sometime before dawn, little Mai, chasing after her dog, stepped onto the porch. A sudden gust ripped the door from its bracing. It crashed, and the village awoke to the sound of a mother's scream. By sunrise, Tin was gone. No note, no goodbye, just silence. The shame, the sorrow, it hollowed him out. He left his tools behind. He walked for 3 days before finding an abandoned shack by the riverbank. And there, he stayed. From that moment on, every door he carved was a quiet apology, a way to say what he couldn't say out loud. "I'm sorry. It should have been me. I was supposed to protect her. If this story reaches a place in you that remembers regret, the kind that never leaves, then subscribe to Woodcarving Artist, because here, we believe even guilt can be shaped into grace, if given enough time, wood, and silence. Some say Teen's first door in exile had no carvings, just one single line etched across its top. To the one I failed. No one ever saw it but him. But the rumor remained, and so did the man, carving sorrow into something strangers would someday call beautiful. One afternoon, as the sun folded itself into the rice fields, a stranger came down the narrow dirt path to Tin's shack. He was young, no more than 30, with a satchel slung over one shoulder and a wooden board tucked under his arm. His name was Min. He didn't knock. No one ever did. He simply stood there, watching the old man carve under the soft orange light. Tin didn't look up, not at first. But after a while he stopped his blade mid-stroke and said, without turning, "You're not lost." Min smiled gently. "Number I came here on purpose." He placed the board down. It was old, maybe decades old, but sanded smooth. "This was from my mother's porch," he said. "She passed away last week. I want to build her a door, one that doesn't close." Tin finally looked at him, not annoyed, not curious, just still. "Doors are made to close," he replied. "Then maybe we've been building them wrong," Min said quietly. For a long moment, nothing moved but the smoke curling from Tin's pipe. Then, without another word, he picked up the board and ran his fingers over the grain. Something shifted in his chest. A softness. A memory. "Sit," he said at last. And they did. For the next few hours, they didn't speak. They simply sat. Two men from different lives, connected by something older than words. Loss. Min spoke of his mother, how she always left the door open for birds, neighbors, even the wind. She said, "You never know which goodbye will be the last," he whispered. Tin nodded. He knew that lesson too well. If you've ever felt the weight of an unfinished goodbye, if you've ever wanted to turn grief into something that breathes, please subscribe to Woodcarving Artist, because this is where pain becomes form, and memory finds a place to rest. That night, Tin lit a single oil lamp and brought out a fresh plank of sandalwood. Min helped hold it steady. For the first time in years, the old man's hands didn't tremble. "We won't build a door," he said. "We'll carve an invitation." And so, under the quiet gaze of the moon, they began. 3 days passed. The air was thick with wood dust and quiet. Min returned every morning, carrying tea, rice, or sometimes nothing but a steady silence. He didn't ask what kind of door they were making. He simply watched as Tin shaped each piece, slowly, carefully, as if he were carving not just wood, but memory itself. The panels were joined without nails, the edges sanded by hand. And when it came time to carve the frame, Tin did something unusual. He left out the handle. Min noticed it but didn't ask. Only when the carving was nearly complete did he speak. "How do you open it?" Tin looked up, his eyes distant. "You don't," he said. "It stays open." Min furrowed his brow. "But there's no handle. How do people close it when they leave?" Tin smiled, faint, almost invisible. "Some doors," he said, "are not meant to be closed. They're meant to remind you that someone's love still lives, even when their body doesn't." Min went quiet. A wind passed through the shack, lifting the scent of sandalwood into the air. In that moment, the door they were building wasn't just wood. It was presence. It was grace. It was his mother, still standing there, apron dusted with flowers, calling him in from the yard. If this kind of story touches something quiet in you, a part that still listens for voices long gone, please consider subscribing to Woodcarving Artist. Here, we carve not for profit, but for meaning. Not for museums, but for memory. The final touch was a set of vines, etched lightly across the top beam. Tin didn't use any pattern. He simply followed the grain, letting the wood tell him where to go. Min leaned closer. "It looks like a path," he said. Tin nodded. "It is, but not one you walk with your feet." That night, they placed the finished door against the back wall. It leaned there quietly, catching the moonlight on its curves. And for the first time in years, the old man did something unexpected. He whispered, "Thank you for asking me to make this. If you believe every soul deserves one final invitation, subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. You might just find your own story waiting to be told." The next morning, Tin invited Min to touch the door. "Run your fingers along the grain," he said, "and listen." Min hesitated, then placed his palm flat against the wood. It was warm, not from sunlight, but from something deeper. "What am I listening for?" he asked. Tin didn't answer right away. He just pulled out a small carving knife and began working on a new panel, his strokes light and rhythmic. "Wood remembers," he finally said. "Every knot is a hardship. Every swirl is a turn in the road. You see these lines? They were drawn by storms, drought, time, but they survived. So when I carve, I don't fight the grain. I follow it, because that's where the story is." Min looked down again. The grain curved gently like a river, then twisted at one edge into a spiral. "It looks like," he paused, "like my mom's handwriting." Tin smiled without looking up. "Maybe it is." There was a quiet laughter between them, soft and unbelieving, but somehow comforting. "You know," Min said, "when I first came here, I thought I was asking for a door. But now I'm not sure what we're making anymore." "A place," Tin said, "not to open, not to close, just to remember. If you've ever wondered whether beauty can grow out of pain, if you've ever believed that even in grief, something can bloom, this is what Woodcarving Artist is about. Subscribe to the channel and walk with us through wood, story, and soul." That afternoon, Tin showed Min a pile of unused boards stacked behind the shack. "These were never finished," he said. "Some felt wrong. Others, I wasn't ready to carve." Min picked one up. It was cracked on one end, warped. "This one looks like it suffered," he said. "Yes," Tin replied, "but it's the one I always come back to. Some things we don't fix. We learn to live with." That board would become the base for a small bench. Not part of the door, but to sit beside it. For those who linger. For those who need a moment longer before walking on. If that kind of pause feels sacred to you, subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. Because sometimes the most important part of the story is the part you sit with, in silence. That evening, the skies darkened early. Heavy clouds rolled in over the distant hills, and a hush fell across the fields like nature was holding its breath. Tin didn't speak much that day, not even when Min brought warm tea or when the first raindrops began to tap gently against the tin roof. But Min noticed. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes kept drifting to the door they had finished, and then to the bench beside it. When the downpour finally came, it came fast, relentless, cold, and loud. Thunder cracked like ancient bones breaking. Min rose to close the shutters, but Tin stopped him. "Leave them," he said softly. "Let the rain in tonight." Min didn't ask why. He simply sat beside the old man and listened. The rain pounded the earth outside, washing away dust, soaking the boards stacked along the wall. And then, without warning, Tin spoke. The night she died, he said, "It rained like this." The words hung in the air, heavy as the storm. "I heard the door fall," he continued. "I was only a few houses away. I ran, but not fast enough." Min looked down. There was nothing to say, only to feel. "I built that door too strong," Tin said, voice cracking, "but I didn't fasten it. I left it leaning, unfinished, like I left too many things." Silence again. Then, after a while, Min said, "And yet, you're still here, still carving." "Maybe," Tin whispered, "because carving is the only way I can keep talking to her." If this story reaches the part of you that remembers someone you can no longer touch, someone whose voice still echoes when it rains, then this channel is for you. Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. Let these stories hold space for the ones you miss. That night, as the storm raged on, Tin reached into a small wooden box and pulled out a tiny bird, carved years ago, unfinished, missing its wings. "I meant this for her," he said, "but I never knew how to make it fly." Min took it gently. "Maybe we can give it wings together. In a world that rushes to forget, this place remembers." Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist, where even rain becomes a memory carved in wood. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but something had changed. The air was softer, brighter. Tin stood early, already smoothing out a fresh piece of wood on the bench, while Min lit the small oil lamp. "We're not done yet," Tin said quietly. "A door without wings can't rise." Min didn't fully understand, but he nodded. Together, they began tracing patterns into the top frame of the memorial door. 2 wings stretched outward, as if about to lift the whole structure from the earth. Tin's hand moved slower now, but more certain. With each carved feather, he whispered things beneath his breath. Words Min couldn't quite hear, but somehow felt. Regret, gratitude, love. "It's not about letting go," Tin finally said. "It's about letting her keep going, even if I stay behind." Min ran his fingers over the soft lines of the wing. "It's beautiful." Tin gave a faint smile. "Then it's enough." By the time they finished, the door looked alive. Not just wood, but memory made light. And Min knew this wasn't just for Tin. It was also for him, for his mother, for every goodbye he never said properly. If this story touches your heart, if it gives you even one quiet breath of healing, please subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. You belong here, among stories carved in silence and love. That afternoon, Min stood with the door in his arms, ready to leave. But just before he stepped away, he turned. "Will you ever finish the bird?" Tin looked at the small figure on the bench. "No," he said. "She doesn't need wings anymore. She became the door." The breeze shifted through the shack then, and for a moment, it felt like something had taken flight. Not seen, but known. And as Min disappeared down the path, Tin sat back, staring at the empty bench. Not empty, really. Just waiting for the next story. Because here, in this small, forgotten place by the river, wood still remembers, and hands still shape what hearts can't always say. If you're still with us, it means you're part of this journey now. Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist. Let these carvings speak to your story too. Weeks passed. The door with wings stood quietly in Min's garden. Never closed, never moved. Just there. Some days, neighbors came by and asked who carved it. Min would smile and say, "A man who doesn't build doors anymore." But back in the countryside, In that small wooden shack by the river, Tin sat alone again. The silence had returned. But this time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The kind you only find after you've said what needed saying, even without words. He no longer rushed his work. Each carving was deliberate, thoughtful. He wasn't trying to finish anything anymore, only to feel each line, to honor each grain. In the evenings, he'd sit on the bench beside the empty frame, smoking his pipe and listening to the wind. Once, he found an old visitor's note tucked under a bowl, probably left by Min. It read, "You didn't just carve a door. You opened one inside me." Tin smiled. A rare, warm smile. If stories like this, quiet, steady, full of soul, are what you've been longing for, then Woodcarving Artist is your home. Subscribe. Stay. Let these stories breathe through you. One morning, a young girl appeared at the edge of the workshop. She was no more than 12, holding a tiny wooden spoon, cracked in two. "Can you fix it?" she asked. Tin took it in his hand, examined the break, and nodded. "Yes," he said, "but not by hiding the crack. We'll make it part of the design." And just like that, the cycle began again. Another story, another stranger, another chance to turn something broken into something beautiful. Because that's what woodcarving is. Not about perfection, but redemption. If you've followed this journey from the first stroke to the final silence, thank you. Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist and keep walking with us through grain and groove, memory and meaning. This is where the silence doesn't end. It begins again as something sacred.